My name is Cora, and for most of my 34 years, I've lived in the gentle shadow of Port Blossom, Oregon. It's a town stitched together with the scent of pine needles after a rainstorm and the quiet hum of the Willamette River. I've always found a peaceful rhythm here, a life measured in the turning of pages as the head librarian at our small community library, and in the steady, precious breaths of my daughter, Lily. My world is one of hushed aisles, the crisp rustle of paper, and the soft light that filters through the tall Douglas firs outside our apartment window. It's a small, carefully tended world, built around the singular, fierce love I have for my little girl. But love, I've learned, doesn't always build walls high enough. Sometimes, the storm comes from within your own house. It started on a Tuesday, one of those Oregon afternoons where the sky can't decide between a drizzle and a downpour. We'd spent 6 terrifying hours at St. Jude's Community Hospital. Lily's face, usually so full of light, had been pale and drawn, her breath catching in her throat from a severe allergic reaction to a bee sting at the park. Now, driving home, she was finally resting, her small form curled in the back seat, her worn calico plush cat, Patches, held tight against her chest. The hospital bracelet looked jarringly white against her tiny wrist. The windshield wipers kept a steady, hypnotic beat against the rain, a calm rhythm that was a world away from the frantic thrumming of my own heart. She was safe. That was the anchor I clung to. As I turned onto the street of our modest apartment complex, the Willamette Arms, a knot of dread tightened in my stomach. I saw my father's old Ford sedan parked in a visitor spot. It was a vessel of unwelcome memories, and its presence meant the quiet sanctuary I had been desperately anticipating was already gone. I parked and turned to Lily, forcing a smile that felt brittle. "We're home, sweet pea," I whispered, brushing a damp curl from her forehead. She nodded, her large, hazel eyes still clouded with exhaustion. The air inside our small apartment was thick with the cloying scent of my mother's perfume, a heavy gardenia that always seemed to announce her presence before she did. It mingled with the damp smell of our raincoats, creating a suffocating perfume of obligation. Before the door had clicked shut behind us, her voice, sharp and unforgiving, cut through the quiet. "Well, it's about time. We've been waiting." My mother, Eleanor, stood with her arms crossed, her body a rigid line of impatience. My father, Richard, was a silent, hulking shadow by the window, his presence an unspoken threat. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. I steered Lily toward the small sofa, my hand a gentle pressure on her back. "Don't play innocent, Cora," Eleanor snapped, her gaze flicking from me to Lily and back again, devoid of any concern for the child who had just left the hospital. "You know perfectly well. Sophie needs the $5,000 for the new oven. Her artisan bakery isn't going to launch itself." I took a deep, steadying breath, my movements slow and deliberate as I hung my keys on the hook by the door. I helped Lily out of her damp coat, my mind racing. The ER copay, the prescription for the new EpiPens, the follow-up appointment with the allergist, it all added up, a mountain of expenses on my librarian's salary. "I can't, Mom," I said softly, my back still to her. "I just paid for Lily's treatment. There's nothing left." "Excuses," she scoffed. "You're sitting here in this perfectly nice apartment, living your life, while your sister is trying to build something. She's struggling, and you have a responsibility. Family helps family." A quiet, bitter laugh almost escaped me. This perfectly nice apartment was a 2-bedroom rental I could barely afford. The furniture was a collection of thrift store finds and hand-me-downs. I was living like a queen of frugality and carefully budgeted meals. "I'm barely making it, Mom," I said, turning to face her. "You know that." That's when Richard moved from the window. He was a large man, and he didn't need to raise his voice to be intimidating. His silence was his weapon. He walked across the living room, his work boots leaving damp imprints on the rug I'd just cleaned. "Your mother asked you a question," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Maybe if you learned a little respect, we wouldn't have to have these conversations." I could feel Lily's small eyes on me, wide and frightened. In them, I saw the reflection of a little girl waiting for her mother to fix things, to smooth the waters, to make the scary people go away, just as I had always done. But this time, something inside me, a tiny, weary part of my soul, refused to bend. "I've done enough," I said, my voice gaining a firmness that surprised even me. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. "I can't keep funding Sophie's dreams. They change every 6 months. My priority is Lily." Eleanor's face contorted with rage. "You selfish, ungrateful girl," she spat, stepping so close I could see the tiny cracks in her foundation. Her finger jabbed the air just inches from my face. "You think you're so much better than us, with your books and your quiet little life. You owe us. You owe this family for everything we've given you." I took a step back, my hands rising instinctively. "Please don't do this now. Not in front of her." "Oh, now you care about what happens in front of her?" Eleanor's laugh was sharp and cruel. And then it happened. It wasn't a blur of motion. For me, time seemed to stretch and slow, each fraction of a second expanding into a clear, crystalline moment. I saw Richard's arm move, not in a wild swing, but with a deliberate, controlled force. I saw his hand, weathered and calloused, connect with the side of my face. The sound was a flat, ugly crack that seemed to silence everything else in the room. A constellation of white light exploded behind my eyes, and I stumbled backward, my hip colliding sharply with the corner of the worn wooden coffee table. The world tilted on its axis. I tasted the coppery tang of blood and the salt of a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. The soft thud of patches hitting the floor was followed by a sound that shattered my world completely. "Mommy!" Lily's scream was high and thin, a shard of pure terror that sliced through the ringing in my ears. I looked up from the floor, my vision swimming. Richard stood over me, his expression a cold mask of satisfaction. "Maybe now you'll learn to listen," he said, his voice calm, as if he'd done nothing more than swat a fly. Lily was crying, her small body trembling as she reached for me, but her eyes were locked on Eleanor, who stood motionless, arms still crossed, a silent, approving witness. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. It was a terrifying cocktail of emotions, the hot shame of my own helplessness, the burning anger at their cruelty, and a cold, practical fear that a neighbor would hear Lily's cries and call the authorities, that I would lose her, that they would paint me as the unstable one in this horrifying family portrait. Outside, the rain fell, a soft, indifferent tapping against the glass, a gentle sound for the violent storm that had just broken inside my home. Eleanor's voice, devoid of all emotion, sliced through the aftermath. "Get up, Cora. And do the right thing." I pushed myself up on my elbows, the pain in my hip a dull, screaming throb. My gaze found Lily's. Her small face was a mess of tears, her bunny forgotten on the floor. Her eyes weren't just scared, they were pleading, begging me to be the mother she believed I was, the one who could make it all stop. My hands were shaking as I wiped the blood from my lip. As I pushed myself to my feet, ignoring the screaming protest from my body, something inside me didn't just crack. It broke. And in that empty, broken space, a seed of resolve, cold and hard and clear, finally took root. I would not let them do this to me. Not in my home. Not in front of my child. Not ever again. I swallowed the metallic taste in my mouth, feeling the deep ache of the bruise already blooming on my cheekbone, and I met their eyes. My voice, when it came, was unervingly calm, a quiet island in the sea of my thundering heart. And a single, silent thought echoed in the chambers of my mind: they have no idea what I'm about to do. That night, after I'd rinsed the last of the pink from the bathroom sink and tucked a still trembling Lily into bed, sleep was an elusive stranger. She had turned her face to the wall, patches clutched tight, as if she couldn't bear to look at the evidence of my weakness blooming on my face. I watched the steady rise and fall of her small chest, each breath a testament to why this had to end. Every creak of the old apartment building had me tensing, my body braced for their return. But the night remained quiet, haunted only by the ghost of my father's hand and the echo of my daughter's scream. By the time the pale, watery light of a port blossom dawn filtered through the blinds, I was already at the kitchen table, a cold, forgotten cup of coffee beside me. Lily was on the couch, the television on a low volume, its colors flickering across her face. She held Patches so tightly that his stitch seemed strained. I sat in the kitchen, wearing sunglasses indoors to hide the dark, purple bloom that had swallowed the corner of my eye, a shameful secret I didn't want my daughter to see again. My phone, which I'd silenced, began to vibrate against the table, a persistent, buzzing pest. Message after message from Eleanor lit up the screen. "You're being so dramatic. This is what family does. Sophie is your sister. You owe her your support. If you don't bring the money by tomorrow, we're coming back." For a fleeting moment, I imagined throwing the phone against the wall, watching it shatter. But I didn't. I opened my banking app instead, the numbers loading with agonizing slowness. The balance was a stark, painful confirmation of my reality. After the hospital bills and rent, there was just over $300 left to last us until my next paycheck. I closed my eyes, and a lifetime of memories flooded in. Eleanor praising Sophie's every flighty passion while dismissing my steady, quiet ambitions. Paying for Sophie's community college classes she'd dropped out of, covering her car insurance after an accident, buying her groceries when she'd overspent on clothes, all under the guise of family helping family. I was the reliable daughter, the sensible one, the emergency contact, the one-woman lending institution. I was the one they called when they needed something, but never just to ask if I was okay. A soft ding pulled me back to the present. A new message, but it wasn't from my mother. It was from Mr. Henderson, the elderly widower who lived in the apartment across the hall. He was a quiet man who mostly kept to himself, but he always had a kind word for Lily. "Cora, is everything all right? I heard a terrible commotion yesterday evening. Please let me know if you need anything." My fingers trembled as I typed back a reassurance, but another message came through before I could send it. "I don't mean to pry. My front door camera caught some of it. I thought you should have it." Attached was a video file. My heart hammered against my ribs. I was terrified to watch it, to see my own humiliation captured in stark, digital reality. But I pressed play. The audio was clear enough to hear Eleanor's sharp, demanding tones. Then I saw myself stumbling backward, hitting the floor. And I heard it again, Lily's scream, a sound so broken it felt like it was tearing through me all over again. The camera, mounted on his doorframe, had captured the whole ugly scene through my open doorway. It caught the moment I looked up at Lily, my attempt at a reassuring smile looking more like a grimace of pain and fear. It caught the way I failed to protect her when I couldn't even protect myself. I paused the video on Lily's face, her eyes wide with a terror no 6-year-old should ever know, patches of fluffy shield clutched to her chest. A wave of hot shame washed over me. My first instinct was to delete it, to bury this evidence of my weakness. But I didn't. I played it again. And again. Each time, I forced myself to look at the fear in my daughter's eyes. Each time, I heard the silent question she was screaming. "Why, Mommy? Why did you let them do that to us?" Eleanor's voice had always been a constant whisper in my ear. "Don't air your dirty laundry, Cora. People will talk. They'll take your child and leave you with nothing." And I had believed her. I had let that fear chain me to their whims, allowing them to chip away at my finances, my confidence, and my spirit. But that fear had already cost me too much. It was now costing my daughter her sense of safety in her own home. I looked from the paused video on my phone to the little girl on my couch. I thought of all the extra shifts I'd picked up at the library, all the nights I'd spent poring over bills, all the small joys I denied myself, all because I believed that if I just gave enough, they might finally love me. They never would. Their love was conditional, transactional, and I was perpetually in arrears. I pressed play one last time. I let Lily's scream fill the quiet kitchen, letting it shatter the silence I had allowed them to impose on my life for far too long. I watched until the screen went dark. Then, with hands that were finally steady, I set the phone down. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but with the clear, powerful rhythm of a war drum. The word never echoed in my head, a promise whispered from a part of myself I had long forgotten. Never again. The gentle tapping of rain against the window was no longer a sound of melancholy, but a cleansing, washing away the years of dust and fear. That Sunday morning, the gray Port Blossom sky felt less like a heavy blanket and more like a clean, slate gray canvas. I moved through the kitchen with a newfound purpose, whisking eggs and milk for pancakes, the familiar scent of vanilla a small comfort in the quiet apartment. Lily was at the kitchen table, her crayons scattered around her. She was coloring, but the usual cheerful humming that accompanied her artistic endeavors was absent. Her silence was a heavy weight in the room. I placed a plate of pancakes, shaped like a smiling cat, in front of her. "For you, sweet pea," I said, my voice soft. She didn't look up, but slid a piece of paper across the table toward me. My breath caught in my throat. It was a child's drawing, but the scene it depicted was hauntingly adult. There I was, a small stick figure lying on the floor. In the corner, a tiny lily cried blue, scribbled tears, her arms wrapped tightly around a lopsided drawing of patches. And standing over me were two large, angry figures. She had captured it all: the brown couch, the rain-streaked window, the terrible truth of the day before. Her small voice, barely a whisper, broke the silence. "Are they going to hurt you again, Mommy?" I swallowed the lump in my throat and reached for her hand. This time, she didn't pull away. Shame and anger coiled in my gut. Shame that she had seen me so vulnerable, so unable to protect her. And a white-hot anger that burned through the shame, anger at myself for letting it happen, for years of prioritizing a twisted definition of family over my own and my daughter's well-being. My phone buzzed again. More messages from Eleanor. "Family means sacrifice. Sophie is counting on you. Pay the rent or we will be back." A final one from Richard, chilling in its simplicity. "A daughter obeys." I looked at Lily, at her old soul eyes filled with a fear she shouldn't have to carry. I looked at the drawing, a child's unfiltered testimony to the ugliness she had witnessed. I couldn't let this be her world. I couldn't let her grow up believing that love looked like this. I picked up the phone, my thumb hovering over the screen. In the dark reflection, I saw the faint outline of the bruise beneath my makeup. I didn't flinch. My fingers moved with a newfound certainty, typing out two words that felt like a declaration of independence. "It's over." Then I turned the phone off. I reached for Lily, pulling her into my lap, holding her close, breathing in the sweet, familiar scent of her hair. "No more, baby," I whispered against her crown. I took her drawing from the table, smoothed its wrinkled edges, and hung it on the refrigerator with a magnet. It would stay there, a stark reminder, a silent promise. I looked into her wide, questioning eyes. "It ends now," I whispered, and for the first time, I knew it was the truth. The next morning, I left a sleeping Lily and drove not to the library, but downtown. The hospital, with its sterile smells and fluorescent hum, felt different this time. I wasn't there as a worried mother, but as a woman seeking facts. A conversation with the billing department confirmed the cost of Lily's visit, nearly $1,800 after my insurance. It was a staggering sum, but a necessary one. My next stop was the Port Blossom Credit Union. The cheerful teller confirmed my worst fears. The joint emergency savings account I shared with my mother, the one I had diligently funded with over $15,000 of my own money over the past decade, was empty. "It looks like there was a withdrawal for the full amount 2 days ago," she said, her expression sympathetic. "Your mother used it to co-sign a business loan for a Sophia Miller." The drive home was a blur of cold air and hot fury. I walked into my apartment and found Lily at the kitchen table, coloring, a half-eaten peanut butter sandwich beside her. She smiled when she saw me, and I managed a weak smile in return, the storm inside me carefully concealed. Later, needing milk, I ran to the Port Blossom Market. The aisles were bustling with the late afternoon rush. And that's when I saw her. My sister, Sophie, was by the organic produce, laughing into her phone while tossing expensive avocados into her cart. She was wearing a new leather jacket and carrying a designer handbag I knew I could never afford. "Yeah, the new oven is amazing," she chirped into her phone. "We're experimenting with sourdough starters this week. It's going to be huge." She saw me then, and her smile faltered. Her eyes swept over me, from my worn coat to my tired face, with a flicker of annoyance. How can you do this? The words tumbled out of me, quiet but shaking. You know what happened. You know what they did. She rolled her eyes, a perfect replica of our mother's dismissive gesture. Oh, Cora, don't be so dramatic. Mom and Dad are just old-fashioned. Maybe if you weren't so sensitive all the time, things wouldn't be so hard for you. She turned her back, dismissing me, laughing again as she walked away down the aisle. I stood there, my knuckles white on the grip of my shopping cart, her casual cruelty sinking into me like splinters of ice. The family martyr. That's what she'd called me once. And I realized, with a clarity that was both painful and liberating, that they didn't love me. They loved my utility. They loved what I could provide. Back home, I sat on the couch, the grocery bag forgotten on the floor. I looked at Lily, who was watching me with worried eyes, her small hand stroking Patches's soft fur. She deserved a mother who was more than a doormat. I deserved to be more than an ATM. I moved to the window, pressing my hand against the cool glass, grounding myself. They're going to see who I really am, I whispered to my reflection. The words weren't a threat. They were a fact. The days that followed were a quiet storm of preparation. I gathered my evidence with the methodical precision of a librarian cataloging a precious collection. I downloaded Mr. Henderson's video. I took screenshots of my mother's threatening texts. I photographed my bruised face from every angle as it shifted through a ghastly palette of colors. I found old photos from years past, a sprained wrist from when my father had grabbed my arm too hard, a fall that had left a permanent, faint scar above my eyebrow. I recorded a statement on my phone, my voice calm and clear, detailing every financial demand, every veiled threat, every instance of emotional manipulation I could recall. I uploaded everything to a secure cloud folder I named Lily's Future. I contacted Sarah Chin, a lawyer whose name I'd gotten from a flyer at the library. Her voice was warm but firm, and for the first time, I felt like I had an ally. Cora, she said after hearing my story, what you're describing is a clear pattern of financial and emotional abuse, culminating in a physical assault. You have every right to protect yourself and your daughter. My final stop was the county records office. The clerk confirmed that the bungalow on Chestnut Lane, the house my parents lived in, the house I had grown up in, was legally mine. It had been left to me in my grandmother's will, a fact my parents had conveniently omitted, preferring to play the role of generous landlords allowing their daughter to live there for a nominal fee, which, I now realized, I had been paying to myself. They were living in my house rent-free, while systematically draining me of my resources. That evening, as I tucked Lily into bed, she held up a new drawing. It was a small, cozy-looking house with a big, smiling sun overhead. 2 stick figures held hands in the front yard. "This is us, Mommy," she said. "We're safe here." A tear escaped and traced a path down my cheek. I kissed her forehead. She was right. It was my job to make that drawing a reality. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and signed the papers Sarah had prepared, a petition for a restraining order and an official eviction notice. The day we served the papers was cold and gray. Deputy Miller, a woman with a calm demeanor and kind eyes, met me at the house on Chestnut Lane. My parents were on the porch, their expressions hardening as we approached. I handed the papers to my father, my hand steady. "You've been served." Eleanor shot to her feet. "You're throwing us out? Your own parents? After everything we've done for you?" I looked at her, seeing not a mother, but a manipulator whose tactics had finally run out. "The only thing you've done is take. It's over." Richard stepped toward me, his shadow falling over me. "You'll regret this, Cora. You're nothing without us." I didn't flinch. I met his gaze. "No," I said, my voice quiet but unshakable. "I was nothing with you. Now I get to find out who I am." Eleanor began to cry, the theatrical sobs I knew so well. "She's putting her own mother out on the street," she wailed to the curious neighbors who had begun to emerge from their homes. But this time, I heard a small voice from the car. Lily had opened the door and was standing beside it, clutching Patches. Her voice was small but carried on the cold air. "You made my mommy cry," she said, looking directly at my mother. "And you hurt her." The effect was astonishing. Eleanor's sobs hitched. Richard stared, for once speechless. The neighbors' curious expressions shifted to something else, understanding, pity, aimed not at my mother, but at me. As Deputy Miller calmly explained the legal ramifications if they failed to vacate the property, I walked back to my car. Eleanor's final, desperate shriek followed me. "You'll regret this. You'll regret turning your back on your family." I paused, looking over my shoulder at the two people who had caused me so much pain. They looked small and lost, surrounded by the life they had built on my compliance. "No," I said softly, more to myself than to them. "You will." Weeks later, we moved into a small rental house on the other side of town. It had a little porch and a yard with lavender bushes lining the walkway. It wasn't the house from Lily's drawing, but it was ours. It was a start. One Saturday morning, as early spring sunshine streamed through the windows, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching Lily brush Patches's fur. The air smelled of damp earth and lavender. I had started therapy, learning to untangle the knots of guilt and obligation that had bound me for so long. Lily was in a children's art class at the community center, her own quiet way of processing the world. A letter arrived that afternoon. The handwriting was my mother's. My first instinct was to throw it away, but curiosity won. I opened it. It wasn't an apology, not really. It was a disjointed, self-pitying account of their new life in a cramped apartment, of Sophie ignoring their calls, of Richard's silent, simmering anger. But at the very end, there was one sentence that snagged in my heart. "I miss hearing Lily laugh." I read the line again, and for the first time, I felt not anger or pain, but a deep, quiet sadness for her. A sadness for the grandmother she could have been, for the mother she had never learned how to be. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. It was a part of my past, but it no longer defined my present. Later, Lily and I were in the small yard, planting a packet of wildflower seeds along the fence. She patted the soil with her small hands, humming a cheerful, tuneless song. "Mommy," she said, looking up at me, her face smudged with dirt. "We're really safe now, right?" I met her gaze, the weight of her question a sacred trust. I knelt beside her in the cool, soft earth. "Yes, my love," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "We're safe." She smiled, a brilliant, unfettered smile that reached all the way to her eyes. She returned to her planting, her humming a little louder now. The sky above was a soft, hopeful blue, and the scent of lavender was a promise of the peace we were building, day by day, seed by seed. This was our home. Not perfect, not without its scars, but it was ours. And it was enough.